Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. It is semi-finals week in the Champions and Challenge Cup. Leinster host Toulon on Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. kickoff at Aviva Stadium. Live commentary on RTÉ Radio 1 for that. Bordeaux against Bath the following afternoon in the other semi-final. Also, Ulster in Challenge Cup semi-finals. 5:30 kickoff against Exeter Chiefs in Belfast on Saturday. Montpellier against Dragons is the other semi-final on Sunday lunchtime. It's a break week in the Guinness Women's Six Nations, but later in the show, I'll be joined by Hannah O'Connor to talk through Ireland's defeat to France in Clermont. An absolutely cracking game at Stade Marcel Michelin and a brilliant occasion as well. Sport podcasts at RTÉ.ie for your emails and thoughts about whatever you want. We'll hopefully get to a couple of them towards the end of this section of the pod as well. For now, though, Bernard Jackman is here in the podcast studio. Bernard, how are you this morning?
Very good, thank you.
And Johnny Murphy is also on the line. Morning, Johnny.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
We'll get right into it. Leinster's latest Champions Cup semi-final. 6 seasons in a row they've been here. 3 wins, 2 defeats in that time. Toulon the opponents this week. Bit of a surprise that we're at the Aviva rather than Murrayfield, I think, what we would have thought a few weeks ago. But Leinster off the back of a 29-26 defeat to Benetton at the weekend, where a lot of their frontline players started. Bernard, I suppose, is that the slap in the face, the splash of water in the face that Leinster maybe not necessarily needed, but got?
Absolutely it is. And you saw a change of strategy from Leo Cullen, obviously going strong the week before the semi-finals on paper, but wasn't the perfect performance by any manner of means. Very sloppy, actually. And I think it's been a tough few days in Leinster. I think, last year Leo Cullen was on the record as saying he thought people got ahead of themselves in that Northampton defeat. Well, certainly I don't think anyone's doing that this year. Not just about Treacy or that game, but just over the course of the season, there's been more little frustrations than probably jubilation, and I think it sets the mindset. It sets the mind perfectly for this. But you still got to find a performance, and that's the hard thing. I don't think. I thought against Ulster it was going to turn. I was turning that first half against Ulster, which was actually ironically with a kind of a second string mixed team, but they will be frustrated. And again, we're just basically backing the players here. I am, in terms of, if Leinster to win, it's just those players find the performance that they're capable of, rather than saying, "Oh yeah, I really like what Leinster did consistently over 4 or 5 games this season." It's kind of been a bit scratchy.
Yeah, and Johnny, it was like I watched this game back knowing the result. I was on Six Nations duty at the weekend, so I was watching this yesterday knowing the result. And what I found very, very strange was probably early stages, midway through the second half, I was watching it going, like, I'm not sure how Leinster are actually going to lose this, because I know they weren't pulling away or anything like that, but they kind of had Benetton at arm's length for a good period of that game, and it was just so bizarre to see it unravel in the final 20 minutes. Now, I know they took off a lot of the frontline internationals and they were already down injured players, down options at loosehead prop, and the scrum went against them, and bits like that obviously followed, but it was just very un-Leinster like in those final 20 minutes to just take the foot off the pedal like that.
Yeah, and there has been kind of periods of games throughout the whole season where this has happened, though. Like they were quite, and maybe more in reverse, where they've been starting very slow, and then I think the stat which I looked at after was like they'd 74% possession, I think, in the first half, and it was only the scoreline at halftime didn't really reflect that. Yes, they looked comfortable, but they weren't kind of that clinical, and it's hard sometimes in the lead up to big European Cup games to kind of get in that. But I was looking at it, particularly the last 20 minutes, they did just lack that energy. And you look at the last play, they were consistently going backwards in that last play. They had 3 points. I suppose that very much how the game ends comes out. I suppose it's not necessarily processed. It's purely results based. If they score there, then they make the right decision, obviously. But they didn't really have any huge amount of dynamism in that last kind of 90 seconds. They were being pushed back the whole way. And I suppose that would have been kind of my concern looking at that when you would back Leinster in a situation to, particularly in the URC, and after the previous week's performance when the guys who came off the bench, yes, but they played the previous week and played very well against Ulster. So a lot of the guys that came off the bench. So yeah, I suppose they'd be frustrated, but I suppose it very much concentrates the mind going into this week. And I think the scrum, obviously giving the Treviso those entries back in the game, that's going to be a huge part of this weekend as well. They have to try and resolve that, because you don't want Toulon getting into your 22 or giving them opportunities to get into your 22 with the power game that they have.
Yeah, the 3 areas that Leinster will be, 4 areas if you include that game management at the end, but the 3 main areas that are relevant for this weekend are scrum, and obviously personnel is important there, right? So I'm sure Leo's saying the rosary that Andrew Porter it will be back this weekend, particularly if Furlong is out. I think Leinster okay in the tie-head side. Clarkson has come on a lot, played lots, and Rabba.
Clarkson was unbelievable the other week against Ulster, I thought.
So you could argue maybe on form. Clarkson. So I wouldn't be overly worried about the tie-head side in terms of personnel, but obviously the loose-head side, for Jerry Kerr, for Ed Byrne, who hasn't had a lot of game time.
I think even Ed Byrne's ineligible this week. I think.
Oh, sorry, is he not back?
I think he's cup-tied. I think he's cup-tied for Europe. I could be wrong now.
Okay.
But anyway,
I assumed, to be honest.
So I would be leaning that Andrew Porter's probably available.
Yes.
If there isn't.
Okay, well that's good.
If they don't have another body in the building, you know.
Okay, well that's a big help. If Andrew Porter's available, because this front 5 for Toulon, whether they go with Olivon and Ribbons, or they go Brian Allen-Lisi, and then obviously a combination of Babini, Jean-Baptiste Gros, Sinclair or Becky Gigershvili. Like, this is a proper scrummaging pack plus maul, and that's the other area that Leinster were very poor against. Their maul defence against Treviso was shocking. So scrum, maul, and out wide defence on the edges.
Out wide.
Yeah, and you look at the pace that Toulon have with Ferte, who scored a double last weekend, Gail Dra. Like, if Leinster give them that edge, they'll take it, and you might not get back. You saw the weekend, Gibson Park on the edge, just getting exposed by Mendy. Like, the real top end speed merchants, the real top end wingers will take you to cleaners there if you don't get it right. And again, it's not something they can't fix. Jacques Nienaber is an excellent defence coach, but we saw last year Northampton coming with the skill set and the plan to rip Leinster apart, and Toulon are just picking up a little bit of form. When Toulon beat Glasgow, I said, what a result for Leinster. Home draw, Toulon 10th or 11th in the top 14. Pierre Mignoni had been on sick leave, but that win in Glasgow seems to have really kind of given them a pep in their step. And while they're not going to make, or highly likely to make, the top 8 in France, this is the only show in town for them. Their team with European legacy, with three wins, their team with class players, the both 10s, Garbisi, Albornoz, both 9s, Ben White or Serran, there's quality there, and it's now becoming a game with way more jeopardy for Leinster, and the pressure. Like, if Leinster were to lose to Toulon this weekend, I mean, the whole project kind of is in question.
And just on that, the defence in the wider channels, like it's guys consistently making poor reads in those wider channels. So a huge amount of kind of Nienaber style will be about the number of passes that you want to kind of shut down and let. So off the edge, it will be kind of 3 passes, middle of the pitch, 2 passes. But on the 15s, and this is an area when they come back blind, say just inside the 15, they're trying to shut that down in 1 pass. But the wingers they're coming into other channels, so there's not enough line speed coming from the guy inside them, and then you have 2 guys going for 1, and they're leaving that guy on the edge free consistently. It is like Gary Ringrose has had a couple of misreads in those wider channels coming off the edge. It is something that, as any attack coach, if you kind of look at those reads out there, you're like, well, we can get after them, be it either kind of throwing a long ball and then a really quick short pass off that on an outside or on an outside shoulder to get around them. It is something that they have to fix, because it's really, really costing them at the moment.
I thought Benetton had a really simple but obviously smart plan. So if you think about most of Benetton's strike plays, they just use Fekitoa or Menicello really direct, like really flat, get them over the gain line and split the pitch in 2. And that's where Leinster can jam from the outside off a ruck near an edge, obviously, but those rucks off the midfield, Leinster were still committed to coming in and trying to shut it down, and Treacy had the shape and the waves to be able to go and draw them out and then play to the edge. And again, you would think that Toulon, with the skill set that they have, with Jackman being a second receiver and quite comfortable on the ball, they are going to ask questions of Leinster that maybe a lot of teams can't, like Bayonne couldn't early on in the year. But I think Toulon they just have so many individuals that potentially are big game players and will see the opportunity here. I still fancy Leinster, but it's they need to be significantly better. And the thing for Leinster is, if you look at attack wise, I mean, like 2 of the tries came from just moments of brilliance from Dan Sheehan.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And again, he could do that again this weekend. But there's still a question mark around Leinster's phase attack that obviously got him in trouble at the end of the game. And just some of the strike plays are starting to show a little bit more creativity or more detail, but there's still other ones that are just a little bit off.
Well, as you pointed out, when I was actually just listening back to the commentary yesterday when I was watching the game, you actually made a point, I think it was early on in the first half, that stylistically Benetton match up very, very similar to Toulon. Can you just kind of give us a little bit more detail on that?
So Benetton were fired up, like they were emotional, they were physical, they had some nice structure, but a lot of it is just this individuals taking people on, offloading, a little bit kind of chaotic, erratic, and play really fast or really slow. They're not looking for an even rhythm, which most URC teams do. You know what I mean? So, and then obviously they had the same profile in terms of a good scrum and a very good maul and very direct in terms of their centre partnership, which Toulon also have. And then also I really like Mendy and on the wing as well. He just has absolute speed, as Gail Dran does. So I saw a profile in them and a way of playing which is quite similar to Toulon. It's not perfect. Treacy have had a terrible season. Toulon have had a terrible season overall in the league, but I think you saw the difference between Benetton last week with their last home game, the emotion, and then how poor they were the week before against Munster. The week before that, they were very good against Exeter. And I think emotionally, you saw against Exeter and Leinster what that can do to a team with quality. And I also think, Toulon have just got that emotional pitch right now. I mean, I don't know if you saw the celebrations after they beat Glasgow away. It was like that was going to be the turning point. And I was chatting to their sub-blue sets, a fella called Becca Gigiashvili, my coach in Grenoble. And he just said it's a new environment at the moment. You know what I mean? It's just turned around completely. The sun is shining. Pierre's starting. They've brought in Codling. They're recruiting for next year, and they're just in a good place.
Yeah, 4 wins in a row now. They're in a lot. As you said, they're in a good place. Very, very different. It feels like to when we would have seen them take on Munster back in January. When, like, in reality, Munster very easily could and should have won that game, and God knows what their season might be looking like now if they actually had done it. In terms of team news, a little bit of doubt around Charles Olivon and Dave Ribbons, which would be 2 huge ones for Toulon. Leinster, obviously, as we mentioned, Porter, they'd be hopeful he's available. James Lowe back in training. We're not sure yet if he'll be around. Ryan Baird still out injured. To go back on Benetton, as you said, with their ability at how they kind of exploited Leinster out wide and managed to get an edge out there. It's probably the best we've seen a team do it to a full strength Leinster or a close to full strength Leinster team this season. Yeah, I would say, because it's happened obviously against Glasgow a few weeks ago, at stages against Ulster last week as well. You think back to games earlier on this season as well. But a lot of those times where Leinster have been kind of blown apart in little phases, it was a second string Leinster team. That was as good as anyone's done it to.
Yeah, really good.
Maybe going back to the Munster game.
Yeah, Munster did.
Although was that even around the edge? Yeah, no, that probably wasn't getting the edge.
That was very smart kicking. An intercept, like a nice variety of stuff. I'm not saying Munster weren't good, but I think the examples you gave there, like against Ulster, we went, they were. Max Deegan was sent off, and they're 29-0 up, whatever. And then the other example, Glasgow, was, if you remember, like Leinster, 13 players. So there was always an excuse. Whereas I don't think against Benetton there was an excuse. It was a very strong side Now, I also do think, and I think we spoke about this pod last week, was that it looked like Leinster were less kamikaze defensively since the Six Nations. And it was like a bit of a hybrid or cooling down of the Leinster system as opposed to the Ireland system. And it was a bit of a mix. But I thought on Saturday night they went full back to what they had been doing. And again, that can like why did Leinster bring Jackman in? They brought him in because they thought they could win a Champions Cup with defence, whatever, and that still is a possibility. And like he is an unbelievable coach. The challenge is to just get it right now for two games. You know, get it right. Put in a defensive performance against Toulon and batter Bordeaux that nullify the attacking threats they have. And again, if you think back to last year, you know, they were very good defensively in the last 16 game and the quarter final was against Glasgow and Harlequins. You know, they kept them to 0, and then obviously just got blown away by Northampton Saints. And I think the challenge is and look, Toulon aren't as good attacking side as Northampton, but they have more oomph up front. You know what I mean? And again, that's the challenge. And I did something with Ryan Baird last night, and he's obviously injured, but he was involved in some of the scout and helping Leinster with the defensive line of prep. And again, he just said, look, you know, you just see maul, and good mauls. And that's something that's not massively part of the URC. Benetton, Treacy did it the other night, but it's an area where the top 14 is on a different level. You know, you saw Montpellier at Connacht, like it is a step up in that area. And yeah, Leinster need to be ready there.
Johnny, maybe this is the last bit we'll finish on. Question for both of you. How much do you think the 2025 semi-final has hung around Leinster over the last 12 months, even from a coaching point of view? If you could even bring us back to an occasion maybe where you've had a big win or a big defeat that has just kind of played on minds and impacted players for a long period of time.
Yeah, well, I think my career would be that Ulster loss in Thomond Park in the quarter-final. That hung around more or less for the rest of the season, really, and into a small bit. But I think there's a lot to be, from a Leinster perspective, with the amount of, and it's spoken about a lot, the amount of guys that have been away in the Lions. But it's how last year is manifested in those moments this weekend, particularly around that discipline space, and how whether they let it get in on top of them or they embrace it and move towards it. I think that's a big thing for me. Everything being equal on paper, they're a better side than Toulon. Yes, Toulon are a good team, but I think Leinster are favourites, and they have the players and the plan to match and beat Toulon and go on and win the tournament. But it does come down to, you know, mentally how they can, when they're under the pump. And I think a discipline error, giving them entries into a maul in the last 5 or 6 minutes, how are they going to react? And they need a 70-minute performance, which they haven't had all year long. You know, that's a big thing for them.
Just on that, I don't think it's just Northampton semi-final last year. There's loads of scar tissue here. There's La Rochelle 3 times, once in COVID, if you remember, in a semi-final. There's Toulouse, obviously. There's Saracens. And these are games that Leinster did loads of, actually some of the best games in recent years in the Champions Cup, the drama, the quality of play. But they have come out the wrong side of way more than they would have liked. And the only way to answer that is to go and lift silverware, and then it's part of your journey, and you go, well, we had all these setbacks and we still found a way, but it's definitely there, and obviously the likes of Toulon will play on that. We heard Northampton last year post match talk about how they built a little bit of leaf from the fact that Leinster weren't closing out tight games. You know, they openly admitted that. So it does, and whether it's real or not, it doesn't matter. It's whether Pierre Mignoni can convince his group that Leinster have weaknesses, right? And unfortunately, you know, the Northampton game or the games we just mentioned, or even Treviso, he can show things that even skeptics would say, yeah, there's a weakness there, you know, on that day. can be fixed, of course it can, but certainly Toulon are coming here not thinking that it's a foregone conclusion that Leinster are through.
Very quickly, even one word answer: who's winning the other semi-final? Bordeaux and Bath on Sunday afternoon.
Bordeaux.
Yeah, it's hard to see past them, is it? Bordeaux, easy favourites at the moment for the title itself.
They have to be favourites.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say easy, but they could lose to Bath because Bath are a very good side. But Bordeaux have been the best team in the competition so far this season since round 1, in my opinion.
Yeah. So that's 3 p.m. Saturday, 5:30 p.m. Saturday evening. Ulster host Exeter Chiefs in the semi-final at the Challenge Cup. It's incredible how much can happen and change in the space of a few weeks. This day 2 weeks ago, 3 of us were doing this podcast, and we were talking about Ulster just off the back of that La Rochelle game. Third in the URC table, feeling great, competing on 2 fronts. Then they go 29-0 down against Leinster, pick up a raft of injuries, get hammered by Munster, and now they're going into this semi-final with their URC playoff in real jeopardy. And all of a sudden, this Challenge Cup semi-final feels like Challenge Cup semi-final feels like a distraction.
Yeah, I think it's not for them. I think it's a great opportunity for them.
Yeah.
But yet they now know that whatever happens in this,
You've this URC running just kind of hanging over you.
Look, it'd be a lot easier if you've got a final in Bilbao to head to. But if you were to not win the semi-final and pick up another couple of injuries, and then you face into Stormers Glasgow, who are fighting for their lives. Glasgow obviously on a bad run, but you'd have to fancy them with a few players back, particularly in front 5. They didn't have a strong front 5 against Stormers, that they would turn it around. And yeah, it's tricky. But like Ulster put themselves in a situation this year where they've got a huge amount to play for, silverware on both fronts, etc. But they have to go and finish it now. Whereas last year at this stage they were limping out, so they are in a way better place, but it's certainly not comfortable. The URC stuff is tricky for them, although they have 2 home games and it's in their own control. It's still tricky. Yeah,
big time. Obviously, Johnny, it was a much changed team last week because of all the injuries, and then I suppose with the semi-final coming up, the good news for them is Tom O'Toole, Nick Timoney, Jude Postlethwaite are all available for selection again, so that's eased a little bit. And Angus Bell, James Hume and Bryn Ward are potentially available this week, or will hopefully be available over the next couple of weeks for the run-in. But I know I said like the Challenge Cup is a bit of a distraction, but you're now at the stage where it's not even worth your while forgetting about the Challenge Cup, because you might need to go and win the Challenge Cup if you want to be playing in the Champions Cup next season, given the way things are going. It's set up a fascinating final 3, at least 3 games for Ulster. They will hope it's 1 or 2 more as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important. They're fighting on both fronts, one for silverware, but most importantly for European qualification next year. I think that's the big thing. There'd be at half time, like last week, with the team that they have, you'd be going like they had a 12-7. I was watching, they have a real chance here, and it's a massive, could be huge upset for and really like kind of rock on with that younger group of players that were playing last week. And then I suppose it was just kind of, the strength and depth on the bench that kind of just, and Munster click into gear for 20-25 minutes playing some class stuff. But look, I think they've built something to be able to say that, with 3 games to go, they've an opportunity, they're 1 win away from a final, 2 wins away from silverware, which guarantees them European Cup, and first silverware in a long, long time. So I think they'd be happy. Exeter, I suppose they've hit a good bit of form. They're 4th in the Premiership. They've got the likes of play with Bosa and those guys. But I'd fancy Ulster to go and win this weekend. Final be a different thing, but I do think, I think it'd be interesting to see what Richie does in terms of with those they are home games obviously in the URC, but they're only 3 points ahead of Connacht. It's like, do they go all in on the Challenge Cup and get that qualification? It's one of those kind of things, because their squad might not be big enough to kind of not yet have the depth to go and get into to do both. I might be wrong in that, but that's just my opinion. Do you go all in on one and see? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think the opportunity for silverware early in this journey for Richie, I think the Challenge Cup is probably the one that they can do it in my opinion.
What Johnny said there about the opportunity of silverware, and even the opportunity of getting to a final is a very, very important thing. Even whether or not they win or lose a final, just given the stage a lot of these players are in the development of their careers, and where Richie and his coaching team are, having just come in. Well, Richie came in 2 years ago, but that full coaching team is really just in their first full season together. Getting to a final would represent a very important step for them and a very important learning experience.
It'd be amazing for them and for Ulster fans to go to Bilbao and be in that shop window that weekend. It is
just have that destination weekend kind of thing.
It'd be class for them. And let's be honest, like the Ravenhill fans have been brilliant through thick and thin, but they would absolutely love that. And I think it would be. I think it'd be great for this young team to experience that. So I can absolutely see why they've chased both. And in fairness, they have been a little bit unlucky with injuries, and now they just need a little bit of luck that some of those come back, and the players you mentioned there, that would be a huge boost for them, particularly Tom O'Toole, just how short of front rows they were. But there's still a nice squad there, and I would agree with Johnny. I think they're good enough to beat Exeter, and then obviously that would give them a huge boost for the last two home games in the URC. And I think ironically, the distraction of a final can help them do both, if that makes sense. They can help them finish off really strong. I just think if they underperform on Saturday or against Exeter, then it's hard to lift yourself up for what's a difficult finish the season in the URC.
And just final point on this game, it's interesting they are going to be playing Exeter this weekend, because I remember it was a few months ago now. It was, I'd say maybe around the turn of the new year, when we were starting to sit up and take notice of how Ulster had improved this season and turned the corner. And you were talking about rebuilding a professional team. And you used Exeter as like the prime example this season of these sides played against each other in the Champions Cup last season. Right. And Exeter went to Belfast in the final round. Now, they didn't have a hope of qualifying. Ulster needed a big win to get through to the knockout stage. And they got it, because Exeter were absolutely hopeless and they were having an utterly awful season. But it's been a remarkable turnaround from them. Not just Challenge Cup semi-final, but they're comfortable in the Premiership. They're in fourth. They're kind of in that likely to finish somewhere between third and fifth. So they're not really looking over their shoulders in terms of the Premiership. They can go full bore this weekend.
They can, and both turnarounds have happened in similar fashions, but from managers at different ends of the spectrum in terms of experience. So Baxter obviously built a team from the second division, won a European Cup, won a Premiership, and unfortunately that team then had to disperse because of salary caps and age profile, etc. And he stepped upstairs and became less hands-on. He empowered his coaches, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work. So he's come back and actually gone back old school. He's now he's running everything. He's doing the analysis. He's coaching the team,
and he's got a new contract as well.
He's got a new contract. He's found new players, new talent. Recruited unbelievably well from the Bucks League, which is the universities league over there. Like he's a master recruiter and building a culture. But he'd already done it once. He's done it again. Whereas Richie's done the same thing. He's done a similar thing with Ulster. He's found talent. He's brought through young talent. He's recruited a couple of. So if you look at the Exeter, some of their foreign players. Baxter went hard on Australia. He's got some quality Wallabies in. Richie's brought in Augustus, Springbok, or South African, and Angus Bell, but he's developed the local talent as well. He also got his coaching staff. Like Baxter had to change his coaching staff, Richie had to change the coaching staff, and now you have two teams who are on the up, regardless of what happens this weekend. Even in fairness, if the horrific happened and Ulster didn't win and didn't qualify for top 8, it would finish off on a big downer. But you still would say they're in a better place because of the development of some of those young players, and it will come next year. But I really think Richie and Baxter, as I said, different ends of the experience table, but both have done a very good job with both clubs.
Yeah, it's going to be really.
They're in an interesting space off the pitch as well with the takeover that's probably going to happen. That's going to vote. There's going to be a vote because I think it's a members club, isn't it? So they have to vote on that. So there's a big opportunity ahead of what Exeter could be doing in terms of, you know, the money that could be coming into the club and the overall. They have a huge catchment area down there. It's a great place. Anyone that's played there just absolutely loves it. So, but I completely agree with Birch there on that. Like, if in a worst case you go, well, look, they had 2 opportunities where last year they didn't. So yeah, it is definitely a step in the right direction. But hopefully they'll finish on a positive, because the work that the coaching team have done this year has been class, and fingers crossed they can go get it done.
Yeah, just a bit more background on that. So basically, Tony Rowe has been the main benefactor of Exeter for as long as Baxter's been there. So they're piece in the pod. He's ready to step away, and it looks like there's an American consortium coming in.
The owners of Bournemouth, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
In Premier League.
Yeah, so again, that just the access to funds, then obviously there's salary cap constraints, but we see how Bath can manage that.
Yeah. So that's Ulster against Exeter, 5:30 Saturday evening. Big weekend for Gareth Steenson on the Women's Six Nations weekend off. He's sure to be making a killing this weekend.
He's up in he's with Premier Sport. He's loving it. Timing has been great.
He'll get every corporate gig under the sun up in Belfast this weekend.
His pockets will be bulging as much as Birch's are on the weekend.
On to Munster then, obviously on the other side of that game from the weekend, 41-14 winners. And similar to what I said when I introduced Ulster, it's mad how a lot of things can change in the space of 2 weeks. You know, you're talking about fears of Munster missing out on top 8. Now they're not safe just yet, but they are now in a situation where they're probably looking up the table and seeing how can we get into the top 4 rather than looking over their shoulder. 2 wins out of these last 2 games. And because one of them is against the Lions, they probably would actually break into that top 4 if they can finish off this season with 2 more wins.
Yeah, it's been really impressive how they've rallied. Obviously, Benetton and Ulster fight 10 points. Circumstances did help them a little bit, but still, their actual the content of the performance is really good. The only and I think they've now, you know, they'll definitely make top 8. You'd fancy to beat the Lions at home on the last day. They did suffer some serious injuries, and speaking to some of the backroom staff in Munster on Tuesday, like that is a big worry. They've lost some real key men. It is an opportunity for others to step up, but and obviously they have a rest week this weekend, which helps. But that Connacht game is massive. They beat Connacht, then they're looking, as you say, top 4 and possibly higher. But I'd say top 4. Lose to Connacht, then it's just beat the Lions to get into top 8.
Yeah, and
great crowd there on Saturday. Great atmosphere. It was good to see, you know, the players being able to go and do what they want to do, and the crowd respond to that.
Yeah, so a win against Connacht will absolutely guarantee a top 8 spot for them. Now, you could also be potentially looking, just making sure you need to get top 7 if Ulster go and win the Challenge Cup. But anyway, as you said on the injuries, Jack Crowley missed out in the warm-up. He was a late withdrawal. Calvin Nash picked up a hamstring injury, a bad-looking hamstring injury as well. John Klein, bicep injury. Ollie Yeager went off with another concussion, which is very worrying just given the history he's had over the last year or two. Tom Farrell picked up a really nasty-looking shoulder injury. It was a really awkward fall as he tried to make a tackle. And then Tyg Byrne went off with a leg injury as well in the second half. We obviously don't know the full details. Clayton McMillan did say after the game, he's quoted as saying there's probably a couple of season enders out there. Coaches generally don't offer that level of information, which would make you believe it's not quite good at all. With that all in mind, Johnny, they do deserve a huge amount of credit because it was a very scrappy game. Well, scrappy performance from both teams really in that first half. Ulster were frustrating Munster very, very well. And when you were seeing all the players go off injured, you were starting to wonder, geez, is this going to be another one of these days for Munster where the disruption just throws them off and they're completely off their game? But as the second half wore on, they played some absolutely excellent rugby. Alex Kendellen, I don't actually know what position he was playing in the second. It was like some sort of free role or something like that, where he was half playing in the forwards, half playing as an outside centre or something like that. It was a very, very impressive result and performance given everything that happened over the course of those 80 minutes.
Yeah, it was massive for them because it was kind of as you say, a real clunky one. At half time, with everything that was going on, I was watching going, oh, here we go. This is not going to, it was just kind of, it seemed to be everything stacking up against you. Hognet's try in down the bottom right hand corner. That was one of the best tries all season. There was 3 or 4 different offloads out the back and time in the pass, but it wasn't just backs. It was all forwards from Casey down, like it was really, really well played, and executed. It was great to see them kind of put that in, and if JJ had his kicking boots on, it could have probably been a bit more. But yeah, like 10 points last 2 games, it's all they wanted, and they really did stand up, particularly in that last kind of 35-40 minutes last weekend. So yeah, but the injury list, as you said, that's a real worry because they're all real, they're big names that are really important. You'd hope Crowley was more of a conservative one. Same with Byrne coming off, but the guys that look like Tom Farrell has been incredible for them. That looked a nasty one. He looked in a lot of pain. So yeah, hopefully they can manage some of those and kind of close it out, and certainly be in the top 7, as you say, which is probably the most important thing for them. But 2 huge games, particularly that Connacht one, with everything that's on the line for Connacht. Connacht they probably need 5 points in that game, really, if they're to get into the top 7. So the next 2 weeks for both of those sides are going to be massive.
And I think, as Johnny kind of said, just with the performance of the second half, when they scored the first try of the second half to just about kind of put a little bit more of a buffer between themselves and Ulster, you could almost see like the weight lifting off the shoulders of some of those players. And then some of the rugby they played for the final 30 minutes or so was excellent. Like that try for John Hodnett down the right corner, where there was behind the back passes from Craig Casey and a couple of others. Like it was fantastic stuff. And as I said, you could almost literally see the shoulders lighten over the course of that second half.
Yeah, there was probably a lot of pressure on them, not just because obviously they need points and they're home, but when Ulster did send such a weak team, that increased the pressure.
Yeah,
the first 20 minutes they're just a little bit off. Ulster, in fairness to them, had a good attacking strategy, kept the ball well, and Munster couldn't really get into it. But once, as you say, they got that try to give them a little bit of distance, they just seemed to relax, and like the quality of their attacking shape was phenomenal. It was as good as we've seen for a while under them. So yeah, they'll go to Connacht and go play. It'll be a totally different game. There'll be way less space and way less time, and Connacht are very much building up for that in their own way. It's going to be a cracker. I think it's great to have an Interpro with so much on the line late in the season.
Yeah,
normally, from memory, they're often being done by January, February, whereas this is meaty now.
Yeah, on Connacht then, like that game next week, and we'll go into a bit more detail on it next week when it is approaching, but it just is so important for Connacht now. They fell short of a losing bonus point, 33-21 against the Lions at the weekend. Obviously, they're still coming home with 5 points, which is more than I think a lot of people would have expected them to get from that South Africa trip. They've Munster at home, Edinburgh away the next 2 games, but I suppose results elsewhere over the last couple of weeks haven't actually done them any favours at all. They're 9th place still, 3 back from Ulster and 4 or 5 back from the Bulls. So they probably are looking at needing a couple of wins there.
Neil, the Bulls finished with 2 games at home.
Yeah.
So I think the Bulls are going to finish on 59. I think they get 10 points. So they're, in my opinion, they're gone. It's Cardiff. It's Cardiff who potentially could come back to them. I think they've got to go to Glasgow and then finish with a home game.
Cardiff, to their credit, two weeks ago, I did actually think they would be the one that
they've won
that were going to slip out, and they've
beaten Scarlets and Ospreys. So they're, in fairness to them, they're hanging in there. But yeah, I think now, obviously, for this to happen, Connacht need to beat Munster and then win in Edinburgh. Munster need to beat the Lions. Ulster need to get, I thought Ulster needed 7 more points from their 2 games. Then Cardiff would lose out. But I don't remember a URC top 8 race as competitive as this, even though it's only 9 teams.
Yeah.
A lot of them play each other. Yeah, it's very competitive between those 9.
Well, the point I was
And
actually
like you
going
look at the table, like you look like even Munster could finish top. I know it's not like it's probably,
Yeah.
but a couple of things go their way.
Yeah.
They could still finish top with the amount of teams that are playing each other in the last couple, which is mental. Like it is a bit mad.
Well, what I was going to say is I do actually remember last season there was a mad race to get into the top 8 last year, but it was kind of a scrap from maybe 5th or 6th place down to 11th or 12th. So there was more teams maybe fighting to actually get in, but it was probably in that middle part of the table where it was all happening. Whereas there's a very, I suppose, aesthetically pleasing thing that you kind of have this bunch of 9 teams and only one of them is going to miss out.
Yeah.
It's an odd one out situation, and just the way the fixtures have fallen, so many of these teams have had to play each other over these last couple of games. I think last season, obviously, there were so many teams involved in the playoff race. Teams fell by the wayside a little bit earlier.
Yeah, and I think probably looking back at it, I mean, Munster were fighting to get in there, and they did on the last day, but Connacht and Ulster were kind of out of it, and they were heading for the Challenge Cup. So it's better from an Irish point of view as well in terms of the focus we have and the opportunities the Irish provinces have. Yeah,
we'll go a bit deeper on Connacht Munster next week because that is shaping up to be an absolute cracker in Galway on Saturday week. Before we move on to the Women's Six Nations with Hannah, I do want to talk about AIL finals weekend, not just the Division 1 finals, victories for St. Mary's and UL Bows, but also up and down the country. To kind of recap everything, I suppose, St. Mary's first time to win the AIL Division 1 since 2010, 46-31 winners against Clontarf, an incredibly impressive final victory when you consider this is only their second season back in Division 1A. UL Bows in the women's 3 in a row beat Blackrock 32-29 with a late Katrina Finn try. Second year in a row they've won the final with a try in the last second. I'll talk to Hannah about that a little bit later on. She probably won't like to talk about it, but she's going to have to, unfortunately. Also around the weekend, though, UCD, they confirmed their place in Division 1A, beat Trinity on Saturday in front of a huge crowd at the UCD Bowl in their playoff. UL Bows men's are up to Division 2A and into staying in All-Ireland League Rugby, avoiding the regionalisation. They beat Sligo in their promotion playoff. Clonmel won 2C. They beat Bective in their final. Malahide, as we've kind of discussed, completed a great escape to stay in the AIL. They got the better of Boyne. And then I suppose ultimately, though, something that puts it all into perspective. People might have noticed I skipped over a division there. UCC staying in Division 1B after they were awarded the win against Shannon over the last couple of days. They were 31-12 ahead heading into the final 20 minutes when their captain Sam O'Sullivan collapsed due to a cardiac arrest. He was treated on the pitch for some time. Thankfully, though, UCC club president John Fitzgerald says he is recovering well. Thankfully, best wishes go out to Sam O'Sullivan and all at UCC as well. And it's good to see all of that being resolved. Shannon, to their credit, have come out and accepted that decision straight away, which I'm sure was difficult. You might be thinking, God, we could come back into that game, but I think it's the right thing for all concerned. And best wishes to Sam. Puts it all into perspective, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, and we were. I think you, as most people, you're following all the results around the country on last weekend and on the Saturday, and there was no updates from the UCC Shannon game, and I only found out a little bit while WhatsApp came in that Sam had that injury health issue, but apparently the care he got and respect everybody in both sides and all that stuff, and it's great to hear that he's on the mend. But yeah, it was a phenomenal. I was on Sunday. I was there for both games in the Energia, and lots of high quality, lots of drama, great support, and it's a great way to finish the season with the jeopardy from staying up in certain divisions and promotion, and then obviously the top dogs, the women's and the men's senior playing out for silverware.
Johnny?
Yeah, it was a great weekend. I think I spoke to Scott Deasy, who's part of the UCC coaching staff. So first and foremost, most important that Sam is okay. A dreadful thing to happen on the pitch and quite scary for everyone involved, but most important, I even got a message on Sunday to say that he was most disappointed. He was sitting up in a hospital bed, and he was most disappointed that he wasn't back in the pav having a few beers with the lads, celebrating staying up. So I think all thoughts are with Sam to make sure that he gets a full recovery. But yeah, like the weekend I watched, Mary's incredibly impressive. 2 years ago, they lifted the 1B trophy against Naas. 3 or 4 games to go. And they were thereabouts last year, and kind of just shows you, gives everyone in the league an opportunity to double up. You look at what Estonians have done over the last number of years, getting promoted 4 or 5 years in a row, and then getting into the semi-final this year. So it's great competition, and it was nice to see such a big crowd there. And for me personally, I would have coached a lot of those Mary's guys in school for a number of years, like Ronan Waters, Miles Carey, Richie Bergen coming off the bench at hooker. It's about 7 or 8 lads. Rory Shields a fullback that I would have coached. So I was delighted for them. And nice for Mark McHugh. And more importantly, Jamie Cornett, who's the forwards coach at Mary's. He's been with a lot of those guys, would have coached a lot of those guys from their whole journey through school, senior cup. And but big things happen in Mary's. They were a score away from winning the Junior Cup. They won the Senior Cup, and they obviously won the AIL. So they have a clear pathway there now. So I'd say they're going to be pushing for a long time with what they have coming through the ranks.
Remarkable how that kind of defending champions curse is still running. Like you go back to
20 years,
Shannon, 20 years now since the last time a team retained the title. But more interestingly as well, this is now 4 years in a row where the previous year's champions have been beaten in the final. Yeah. Getting all the way to that one game to actually going and retaining it and losing again.
Clontarf would be good if they didn't win, and to lose to Mary's 3 times in the same season is some achievement for Mary's. But to be fair to Tarf, their ability to keep coming back, obviously winning plenty of them as well, but keep coming back every year is phenomenal. Johnny mentioned there, I thought Miles Carey was exceptional, and I don't think any of us expected Mary's to pull away as convincingly as it did, and great team, only not long out of 1B. It's summarised, and to be fair, like I remember, like Mary's and Terranure should always be strong, but it's not so long ago that neither of them were. They both hit. And you're involved in Terranure. They both hit tough periods, but they both made plans, and then they implemented the plans, and now they're role models or case studies for every club in the country to go and see how they create this environment, the vibe, supporters, positive playing experience. And it's just great to see, it's not just them, but in particular them, because they've been recent winners and have had, dipped out of a 1A. How they've done it is testimony to the volunteers in the club.
And I think even going forward, just specifically on those two clubs, I think like there is an element that the jealousy of one doing well is going to keep driving the other on as well. Like, Terranure had some excellent seasons when St. Mary's were still down in Division 1B, and I don't think it's any surprise that they've looked across the neighbourhood and seen how well things have gone, and they've come up and done so brilliantly. And I'm sure next season Terranure won't have enjoyed seeing St. Mary's lifting the cup at the Aviva Stadium. They'll be coming back for more next year. Before finishing up, there is an email on the AIL that I've kind of had tucked away for a couple of weeks. We've run out of time the last couple of weeks, but it's kind of nearly evergreen as we're into this time of the season. This is from Donal. And it's not something we've spoken a huge amount about this season, but it does have a big impact going into next year's All-Ireland League. Not sure it's got much coverage, but the IRFU imposed regionalisation of the AIL 2B and 2C might be worth a slot at some time. As far as I know, only one Leinster AIL club is in favour, and the vast majority of clubs across the island against it. It'll save a bit of time and travel for those who are geographically disadvantaged, and only for those who would have been in 2B and 2C next season, but at the cost of negating the all-island nature of the competition that has been a success. For reference, this is the decision from the IRFU, which is going to turn Division 2B and 2C into a 2B North and 2B South from next season. So Donal continues, in my opinion, the revised structure has many negatives, not an improvement on the status quo, even with its imperfections, and applied by diktat by the IRFU on a take it or leave it approach. He also says, commiserations to All Crescent, which is my my home club is there but for the grace of God would be my own club, Greystones. Fingers crossed our clubs will renew rugby friendship next season in 2A. How long 2A will avoid a similar chop by the IRFU is not known. So he's referencing Old Crescent dropped from 2A down into what is now going to be 2B North, to North and South. Yeah. So they're into a regionalisation next season, having previously been 2 divisions away from it.
I think it's a really good email. It would certainly be consistent with what I've heard over the last while. So I've been helping Malahide for the last couple of months, and so I've been at AIL games speaking to clubs who were in 2C, and the vast actually haven't found no one came up to me and said it was positive, this regionalisation, and certainly the criticism or the feedback was very little consultation and just being told, and I do, and the sentiment is, you know, we fought to stay in the All-Ireland League, we fought to get into the All-Ireland League, and now it's not really an All-Ireland League, you know. So there's the negative side of it, but yeah, I think clubs are good at just getting on with it and are used to maybe having a lack of consultation.
I know, Johnny, like you're still a division removed away from that up in 1B, but what sort of things are you hearing from the clubs you're out and about with?
Yeah, there wasn't very many people that were for it, if any, to be honest. On the, you know, within the kind of Leinster Council, it was. Yeah, I think there was one, but then you have the likes of Skerries that are going to be in North, and someone flippantly said, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to playing in the Ulster Junior League next year because the majority of travel is going to be up north for them." Yeah, I do think the consultation between the RFU and the clubs probably wasn't there. Like it's been there for a while. There has been conversations going on with David Nusafora when David Nusafora was on pre-COVID 2017, 18, 19. I was part of a group that went in to meet him to discuss kind of how to potentially move kind of bring the AIL back, not to where it was, because that's not possible within the current structures of kind of professionalism, but to try and raise the profile of it and push it. And they have done a number of things, but I think the clubs have led that, be it through the streaming that the majority of clubs are doing now across, and they're paying for that themselves. And like you look at the crowds over the last couple of weekends, semi-finals and finals, and the interest that is there. Yeah, it was always, for me, it was always going to be the RFU's most difficult challenge to get all stakeholders on board with something and try to, you know, really drive it forward. And whether that's a Super 6s, Super 8s, Super 10s like there are in some other countries, and having a clear relegation promotion to get into that, giving people the opportunity to step up. But yeah, I think there's very much a frustration on the top 50 clubs in Ireland about how this came about and how it went down. And I'm not speaking out of turn saying that anyone that's asked about it, that's just the truth of it. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it does go and thing. But the clubs are left in a situation where, as Bert says, they get on with it, and that's the way it is.
And I think one of the issues that I've heard from speaking to people who kind of would be affected by it, clubs in and around that those leagues, not only is it going back to an element of regionalisation where you're either north or south or whatever, but there's also the part of it where actually getting promoted back into Division 2A is harder than it's ever been now, because not only are you competing with teams in your own division, but there's a division side by side where you have to kind of get through your division, but you also there's another element to it. You have to finish higher up the table. It's actually tougher to get out of that division now.
Yeah, it is, and yeah, it's. I understand what the mindset was, but again, if you just get people and bring them on a journey and try and explain your point rather than just railroad it through, and maybe the RFU might argue that they've communicated it, but certainly on the ground, a lot of people feel they haven't been communicated to, and it's just when there's so much positivity in a club game, and I know it doesn't affect 1A or 1B or 2A, but certainly for 2B and 2C, there's a lot of unhappy club people.
And even
I think that's important as well, that like getting the right people into the room that are proactive and want to see the club game prosper and continue to grow and do what it's doing week in, week out. I think that's really important, because if you get those people in, you're listened to, and then there'll be some compromise across what is what clubs will want and accept. And I don't think that compromise was really reached at all from the people that I've spoken to at every AIL game and across all the leagues. A number of friends coach at different levels across all 5 divisions, and the general consensus is that the clubs were not listened to in this in this restructure.
Yeah, and it's strange because for some teams now, all of a sudden they're considerably closer than they had been previously to actually getting up into Division 2A. But there are other clubs now who are all of a sudden
risk of going junior.
Are risk of going junior within 12 months when they had previously been a full division separated from it. It's a very interesting dynamic, and it's going to be fascinating to see how that all plays out next season. As I said, my home club, Old Crescent, we've been relegated down from 2A into this 2B South next season. I will finish, though. I do want to give a shout out to Old Crescent. I promised to do this and I nearly forgot. The Thirds in Old Crescent, Web Cup champions at the weekend. 19 years on since they last won the trophy. They beat Richmond in the final, which was played at Thomond's Fitzgerald Park. 2 late tries. I think they came from about 10 points down in the final quarter to win it. But first time since 2007 they won that cup. The old Thirds team I play with. And in particular, I'm going to give a shout out to Andy Canaan, who, as far as I know, 19 years separated from his 2 Web Cup wins, still going strong in Thirds rugby. That's what it's all about. And hopefully he still goes on for a good few more years. Yes, that's where we'll leave it in this section of the podcast.
Just one thing, Neil.
Go for it, Johnny.
I'm running a marathon in 2 weeks' time for motor neuron disease for the 745 charity. So Ed Slater, Lewis Moody, Dottie Weir, and Rob Burrow. So I might send on the link. Just looking for a few quid to drag 100 kilos with no cruciate around 42.2, which I only realized at the weekend. That 0.2 seemingly is very important. 42.2 kilometers. So I'm running around Kildare from Ellistown, which is my GAA club, to Kildare, my minis club, to Newbridge College, on to Newbridge Rugby Club, and then finish at Naas Rugby Club on Saturday the 16th. So feel free, people, to join or whatever along the leg, but it'll be in the morning time of Saturday the 16th. So I can't say I'm looking forward to it, but the training's gone. I'm still walking, which is the most important thing.
Good stuff. If for anyone who does want to find out details,
I'll be on my Instagram page.
On your Instagram, what is it?
In the bio, and then there's an I Donate page then as well. So I'll forward all the stuff on, and I'm sure you can throw it out there.
Brilliant stuff. Well, best of luck to it, and hopefully we'll speak to you before that as well. Johnny, thanks a mil. Bernard, thank you as well. That's it for this part of the podcast. Coming up in just a second, I'll be talking to Hannah O'Connor, Women's Six Nations. Now then, turning our attention to the Women's Six Nations. Ireland beaten 26-7 by France in Clermont-Auvergne on Saturday evening. A second defeat out of 3 games for Ireland so far, but I think it's fair to say a lot of positives heading into the break week and home games against Wales and Scotland to come. Joined by Hannah O'Connor, as usual, for this section of the podcast. Hannah, before we get talking about Ireland and France on Saturday night in Clermont, in the first part of the podcast with Bernard and Johnny, we kind of finished by having a bit of a roundup of the club season and club finals over the weekend. Unfortunately, I am going to have to bring that up with you just to round it all off. UL Bows against Blackrock in that final on Sunday. Unfortunately, you missed out. Your foot injury didn't quite heal up quickly enough. 32-29. And bloody hell, UL Bows just doing it again in the last minute. I imagine that was a pretty heartbreaking dressing room on Sunday evening.
Yeah, it was a pretty tough one to take now. As I said, missing out and having to watch it on was hard enough. And then, the girls putting in an unbelievable performance. And as you said, like at the death to be pipped literally with the last play of the game is just, that's just sport and it's in its perfect cruel form. So yeah, it was absolutely gutting. So yeah, very, very, very disappointed. Way to end a really, really good season for us in Clubland. But the usual thing, dust ourselves off, gives you more hunger and fire in the belly to come back at it again. So yeah, the girls are already looking forward and gearing up to next season already, and have kind of licked the wounds a bit on Sunday and Monday, and have regrouped a little bit since then. But yeah, a definite stinger to that one at the end of the season, but wasn't for the one to try and a great game to watch for the neutral, as they say. But for us, unfortunately, yeah, the wrong end of a tough as results to take.
Yeah, and kind of like following on even from last year with Bo's second year in a row, as I said, that not just kind of like a late try to win it, like literally the last play of the game, and not to rub salt in the wounds, but 2 minutes from time, you obviously thought you would have had it as well with a late try to go back in front.
I know. You think at that stage, kind of catch the kickoff and you've done your job of kind of, keep ball for the last whatever 20, 30 seconds that's left. But just that's kind of stunned feeling at that full time. I don't think I've ever probably been part of a game. You've lost a fair share of kind of big matches and stuff like that over the years, but I think to lose a game of that nature, as you said, to score so close to the death and then to be on the wrong side of it still, despite that, is just extra tough to take. So yeah, fire in the belly to come back at it next year, and we're looking forward to ripping into it and getting revenge come the new season.
Absolutely. And like I know, as I said, you had your foot injury, you missed out, you weren't able to play. You made the call on it kind of relatively early last week. Was there any stage during the game where you were like, "Whoa, this thing's feeling all right, maybe I could have given it a lash."
I know, yeah, it was definitely. I had to make the call early in the week. It was kind of one of those things that I just couldn't kind of, in good faith, take a spot on the bench from. We had great squad depth all year, like, and we were two or three deep in every position, and just in like in my kind of in good heart and good faith, I couldn't take a spot on the bench, even if I thought I could have done a job and done it service and done it justice, but like it just wasn't going to be right, and we feel grand jogging along, and then any pressure through it just kind of send it into spike mode. So I said it would have been even more embarrassing if I was the cause for having to try to take the glory of doing a John Terry and going full kit and trying to put myself on there just for the sake of myself. So had to make the call for the better of everybody, and yeah, look, the girls gave it everything, and as I said, it wasn't for the one to trying to get us across the line, but yeah, a sad end to an otherwise really, really good season.
Yeah, I was just about to say, to finish on a positive note, all in all, a really, really good season.
Yeah.
Back to the final for the first time in a few years, and kind of breaking up Bows and Railway, who'd kind of been off on their own for the last couple of years, and an Aviva final as well, which I'm trying to run through in my head. The last few you would have been in would have been Donnybrook, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we had two in Donnybrook,
Yeah.
one and lost one against Railway in Donnybrook, and then kind of have been, as you said, like on that kind of rebuild. We lost a good cohort that squad through retirements at the time after winning it in 2022. So we've been on the rebuild, and it has been a great squad, like and serious talent coming through the ranks in our place. So that gives us a lot of hope as well, and largely the same group that will be staying on as well. So everybody will have gained the experience from it, and that occasion, as you said, of playing the Aviva will stand us in good stead. And all the other cliches, Neil, that you can give when you lose a horrendous final. And I'll take if we're playing cliche bingo, I'll take them all off to make it sound less painful.
Yeah, I've heard them all over the years, don't worry. But
Yeah,
listen, fair play
yeah,
and a good season. We'll move on
yeah,
to the Six Nations. Um, as we said, Ireland beaten 26-7 by France at Stade Marcel Michelin in Clermont-Auvergne. Before we go through the game itself, I do just want to talk about the occasion. I was lucky enough to be there on Saturday evening. I'd never been to Clermont, Stade Marcel Michelin before, one of the great rugby cathedrals, and Jesus, I was just blown away by that on Saturday evening. If like everything, the French just they know how to do it. The From the pre-match stuff, the crowd were in early. It's funny, there were 17,000 people there, which is 60,000 fewer than there would have been at Twickenham a few weeks previous for the England Ireland game. And while that was a brilliant occasion and a really enjoyable experience, and it felt like a huge occasion, there was something very different about Saturday night. It was raucous and kind of aggressive. Every single time Ireland were scoring a try in the first half, I was kind of dropping my head down to start taking a few notes on the laptop, preparing myself to write up a match report. And all of a sudden, you would hear that guttural roar every time the French crowd saw that first replay where they might have thought a ball was held up or it was a knock on, and then we're going
yeah.
back to the TMO. The noise in that stadium was just phenomenal, and it lent to a brilliant, brilliant game of rugby for which a 26-7 scoreline I don't think really does it justice, because it actually
No.
was. I think if you go back over the last, I'm going to say the last 5, 6 years at least, if you remove England-France games from the equation, I can't remember a better women's Six Nations game than that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Like, and as you said, like, there's something different about a nighttime match
Yeah.
in France. Like we saw it with the men's Six Nations, it just creates an absolute amphitheater of an occasion. And yeah, as you said, like 77,000 in Twickenham, that daytime feel, and it's like everybody is there for it. And like, look, everybody comes there, and that's what you want: bums on seats to watch women's rugby, and they're all there to enjoy the occasion.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, as you said, it felt even through the telly of watching it and the sound of it, it just felt like a different, proper test match, ready to rip into it. As you said, like you love that nothing more than the crowd getting behind the TMO decisions and almost making it a real fun kind of, yeah, putting pressure on every aspect of the referee's decisions and everything that comes with it. But yeah, it just makes for a class atmosphere. And as you said, yeah, arguably we talked about it last week being the game of the round and possibly the game of the tournament. And for that first half, it was for the whole match really, but the first half in particular was an absolute humdinger and just is a cruel scoreline if you're just looking at it as a scoreline, a cruel scoreline for Ireland to be on the wrong side of it so badly.
Yeah, like literally from the kickoff, you've the ball going straight to Aoife Wafer, who just sends the French hooker Lazarco over on her backside, just bounces her over. Right from that moment, you were like, okay, this is the physical tone for the game, and it was
Yeah,
it was incredible. We'll go through some of the defensive numbers and the tackle numbers, particularly from France, because they're absolutely phenomenal. But even Wafer herself, 20 carries, 20 tackles. Aaron King had something like 57 ruck injuries over the course of the game, combined with, I think, it combined 20 tackles and carries, like almost
serious
involved almost
frustration.
involved in every second ruck in some
Yeah,
capacity. But what I thought was incredible, I mentioned the French crowd as well and how they were. Said there was an element maybe people were getting a little bit riled up from Ireland talking themselves up over the previous week, and I wouldn't hold that against them because I think it was an important thing to do. And the fact that they should have scored 4 or 5 tries in that first half means they had every right to be talking themselves up. But I
yeah,
did think it was incredible. About 10, 15 minutes after the final whistle had blown, the Irish fans were kind of doing their lap of the stadium, trying to just kind of give their thanks to the small pockets of Irish
love,
fans
yeah,
that were scattered around the stadium. And I would say the stadium was still probably half, three-quarters full at this stage. And the French supporters were getting up on their feet, applauding the Irish team. It was remarkable to see. Like I kind of said it in a piece I wrote. We joke this time of the year about the knowledgeable crowds, maybe at Augusta or the Crucible for the World Snooker Championships. But
yeah, yeah,
it is like that is you're talking a knowledgeable rugby crowd there. It was very noticeable after the game, the
yeah.
respect that they had for the 80 minutes that they'd seen from the Irish team.
Yeah, and you like, and that was, I saw that on social media as well, of the clips that are going around. As you said, like three-quarters of that crowd full, and wanting to pay their respects there to that Irish team as much as they were to their own home team. But yeah, I think that speaks volumes of the effort that was put in by Ireland and the match that they were treated to there in Clermont. And it just, I nearly even think it makes it nearly harder for the girls to take as a loss, knowing how
Mm.
well you put it to them, because the French wouldn't hand out those kind of congratulatory claps too often. They'd be quick enough to dismiss any opposition that wasn't up to the standard of taking on their mighty French team. But yeah, fair credit to Ireland. They were well deserving of that applause from both home and away fans, because they really did put it up to them as best that they could. And as you said, the stats speak for themselves on both sides of the ball. They're pretty ridiculous in some aspects that we'll probably chat through.
Um, no two ways of saying it though. When it comes to the result and the outcome, it's a missed opportunity, big
Yeah.
time. 26-7, as we said in the end, France pulling clear in the second half, as they have in the two previous games so
Mm-hmm.
far. Coming
Mm-hmm.
into coming into this third round at the weekend, they would have scored 66 of their 78 points in those opening two rounds in the second half of games. So it stood to reason Ireland needed a big first half to set the tone, have a lead to try hold on, because you knew you were getting a French onslaught in the second half.
Yeah.
With that said, crossing the line 5 times in that opening half and coming away with 7 all after 40 minutes, it just Scott Bemand said it himself, like, it's not good enough as a return.
Yeah.
3 tries disallowed, another one, Brittany Hogan just held up over the line as well.
Yeah.
To dominate possession to that extent, 75% territory, 60+% possession. Um, you're not gonna beat the best teams in the world. You're not gonna break into the top four with that kind of return from those 40 minutes.
No, and as you said, like they had done everything else right. They knew, and we knew that Ireland were going to try come out the block, start fast because of, as you said, the stats speak for themselves about a slow French starting team. They needed to come out and absolutely rattle them. That they did. They took it to them in every aspect. And you said Aoife Waver setting the tone from that first carry. She's been waiting a good few months for that one, and I'd say the kick at the 10 Arbez. I don't think she meant quite to kick it straight to her for a start, but yeah, she'd relish that, and that set the tone. We saw each one of them to a player getting absolutely stuck in. There was such a sense of niggle. Ireland at ruck time, there was a ferocious sense of aggression and intent that even on our own ball, we looked really, really solid. There was French players spilling out the back of it. They were struggling to contain Ireland, and ultimately, like, Ireland were unlucky at times that the referee didn't penalise them more. Yes, they got a yellow card for the deliberate knock on, but the French were cute. Like they'd been in this situation before. They were rolling out the back of rucks. They were slowing it down for Emily Lane. They were rolling into her a couple of times, taking out the 9, just borderline playing on that edge of the cusp where the referee has to make a call and deciding it. It allowed them to live in it. But ultimately, as you said, like you're never going to get those opportunities at Test match rugby like they did. And that's what's worse is they created those opportunities. They absolutely grafted for those opportunities. They upped their stats on line out. They got the percentages back up there to the high 80s. Scrum was still a massively solid set piece for them. And then, just as you said, it's such a zapper to go in at half time to only be 7-all when you've crossed the whitewash that many times and you literally have nothing to show for it other than a 7-all, 7 apiece on the scoreline, where France have kind of had almost like one entry, one score, such as their clinical nature of it. One maul, thank you very much, we'll take the score out of that one. So it's a real sickener, and you know yourself when you're playing, it's just you're jogging into halftime when the halftime whistle goes and you're like, France are delighted. They know what they can pack, as you said, such a high percentage of their points coming in the second half across all competition. It's just, you're always going to struggle to contain it in the second 40. So from a psychological battle, that was a really tough one to take, and you're always going to face an uphill battle in the second 40 after that.
Sometimes after games like this, we can kind of get sucked into just looking at the things Ireland didn't do. And obviously, look, they didn't convert chances. That is the big thing. But I do think you have to give so much credit to the French defence. And as you said, playing on the limit at times, pushing the referee's boundaries, maybe they got a couple of lucky calls. But the level of aggression and the level of commitment in their defence was absolutely staggering. Just to go through some of the stats from France's defence. Ireland made 167 carries across the course of that 80 minutes, but France made 240 tackles. So that just illustrates the sheer number of times that an Irish ball carrier was met with a double tackle is incredible. All 8 of the French forwards hit double digits in tackles. 6 of the 8 starting forwards had 19 or more tackles each. Axel Berthomeu, who of Aoife Wafer fame, bloody hell, in fairness to her, she answered a few critics. Well, maybe she might have critics about her actual general play. It was about that, but she put in a performance. She only played 49 minutes, but she made 25 tackles across those 49 minutes. I imagine her GPS stats said she was absolutely gassed with half an hour to go, but what an effort out of her. It just shows to show, number one, how hard Ireland made France work, but number two, just how resolute and destructive France were in defence.
Yeah, and you have to give full credit, as you said, to both sides of the ball. Ireland were, you felt every bit worth a lead in that first half with the way they were playing and the physicality they were bringing to it. Perfectly quick ruck ball for Emily Lane to whip it out. We saw Bevan Parsons and we saw Robin O'Connor coming off their wing. We saw them with a bit more space because of the creation of space at the forwards and the holes that were being punched created through that front foot ball. Ireland played on top. They played territory well. I think Johne had one kick that was probably a bit of a zapper that missed her touch soon after that, yellow. But, other than that, you could say they were pretty flawless in everything that they had done. But, credit to France, they're a big championship team. They know exactly how to do it. But to play, and sometimes you'd see stats on a team like that would make that amount of tackles and absolutely flag for the second half and not be able to turn it to the other side. But credit to them, they showed their class and be able to turn the screw in the second half and come out with just up the ante that little bit more and up the pace of their ruck ball. And Ireland ultimately found it difficult to live with in the second half. But yeah, to a player, for them, everybody was worthy of their starting spot there in the jerseys, that the numbers, as you said, speak for themselves. And same for Ireland as well, of the shift that the girls have put in. It's just a really disappointing one to take.
Yeah, and also in fairness to France as well, even aside from the numbers and stuff, the intangibles of, they would have been under an enormous amount of pressure coming into that game. particularly knowing that Ireland, that they probably got let off the hook last time around in the World Cup against Ireland, knowing that they haven't really blown Wales or Italy away in the opening two rounds of the Six Nations so far, and then having an Ireland team coming over who are publicly talking about how they want your scalp, they want to knock you out, knock you off your perch in the top four of the world, they want to take your top two place in the Six Nations. There would have been an enormous amount of pressure on that bunch of players in front of a big home crowd and being dominated in the first half. But the calmness they showed was very, very impressive.
Yeah, and especially like they were missing Gabby Vernier, who's been so core to everything that they do well, playing at 12 in terms of both on both sides of the ball, how she leads in her stats and her numbers, and how she just is a massive leader for that team. And I think Ireland would have been delighted not to see her involved and thinking they did a real crack here of kind of an unsettled combination in the centres. But like, yeah, as you said, France had, we're definitely going to be feeling that pressure. Like I said, we've seen it with the men's team, and the women's team is no different, that they expect high standards from their women's team when they play rugby too, that they wouldn't be quick to kind of get on top of them if they felt that they weren't up to the play. So they're going to be feeling that. As you said, they've been underwhelming the first two matches. They had a kind of a meh World Cup, pulled it out of the bag against us when we couldn't get across the line. But I suppose the narrative was always that, France underperformed and Ireland had the one that got away in those matches that we've seen. So they had a big point to prove. And look, that they did. You can't argue with how they came out in that second half. And ultimately, I think, we spoke about Ireland coming to these matches and the likes of a Twickenham, that it's now being disappointed with how the outcome has gone. We're not overawed by the occasion of it anymore, that we're showing up to these big games against the 1 and 2 tier teams in this competition and we're putting it up to them. And it's a frustration now that we haven't managed to be more clinical, with the chances that we have, and really outmuscle them a little bit better. But look, the gap, as we continually talk about, is closing. And I think there was every sign of that in how we went out and put our game plan on France, rather than waiting to feed off scraps, maybe like we have over the last few years when France make a mistake. It was very much Ireland's game plan and Ireland's stamp. It was just they were met with a ferocious, a tenacious French team on the defensive side of the ball who were able to flick a switch in the second half ultimately.
Yeah, I think at this stage now there's a line in the sand definitely there where I don't think we'd be worrying about Ireland going into intimidating atmospheres or kind of cauldron stadiums anymore. I think the way they handled Twickenham, but more so the way they attacked that first half against France on Saturday. I said it to you before we started, as the teams were coming out and the noise in the stadium was really lifting. I did actually for a moment kind of go, "Oh geez, I'm a little bit worried here. This feels very, very different to any game I've been at with this Irish women's team." But bloody hell, that first half, the execution wasn't there, but the approach and the mentality was absolutely spot on.
Yeah,
I
really
suppose
was.
the difference really then in the second half, it probably showed how for Ireland to thrive, they really need to keep a structure on the game. And once France started picking up bits of loose scraps, really kind of taking on Ireland in unstructured play, that's where we started to see them get pulled apart. We saw, we spoke about it coming into the game where that's where we would have seen it against Italy the week previous, where Italy picked off some of those scores. It's kicks going a little bit too deep, the chase not really being there, reaction to turnover. It's where Ireland are looking quite vulnerable at the moment. To break down even one stat here I found very interesting. In terms of clean breaks over the course of the 80 minutes, France had 8, Ireland had 6. Not a
Yeah.
major difference there, but France beat 35 defenders. Ireland beat 16.
Yeah.
France's backline players, including replacements, missed 4 tackles. France's starting backline plus replacements. Ireland's starting backline plus replacements missed 21 tackles. When France
Yeah.
started to kind of get the ball wide, off
Yeah.
turnover ball, off scraps, that's when we really saw Ireland kind of getting stretched. Even in the first half when Ireland were largely in control, that's where France were getting their change.
And that is ultimately, and you saw it there where they got their first try. Like Ireland had started so well, and for France to slap back with like one entry, one kick for touch, one kind of devastating maul, it's a real kick in the teeth. But yeah, that second half, they just turned the screw. They went for that power game that we saw them put in against Italy in the previous week against Wales or whoever it was. They had the previous week, I think it was Wales. But they just can turn the screw. They can just flick a switch and up it. And then, as you said, they can live on the scraps fine and they can make such hay out of the scraps. God, can they make hay out of it? But it just seems their ability to cut us up, where it takes us so much longer than that structured play to get our flow and get our rhythm and not have to we struggle probably more in the loose to just play that heads up rugby. Still, we saw a fantastic bit of it last week against Italy down the wing for that Baven Parsons third try. And that's what you'd love to see more in that second half of the girls. I found at times we went back to that zigzagging play where the ruck became a little bit slow and France looked very comfortable compared to the first half where we had been bang, bang, bang. And, we knew exactly what we were doing. Whereas you said, France, they'll do both against you. They will, happily retain the ball for as long as they need to, or as you said, probably even more comfortable just cutting loose and playing that jouet ball that they're so used to playing and being devastatingly clinical with it when it matters the most in key points of games. Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. I suppose if you were to probably look at the stats of like green zone entries versus conversions, that's where France still ultimately have that power game against Ireland, and where Ireland still have that to bridge that gap of, get your opportunities. You have to take them against the likes of the England and France, because you can bet that if they get a sniff, they're going to take probably 4 out of 5 of their chances that you give them.
Yeah, and I'd say that probably was roughly their conversion rate at the weekend as well, 4 to 5. Use of the bench. I know that was something you did want to talk about. I suppose the timing was a little bit tricky. Scott Bemand, as he has over the course of these games, kind of gone for the bomb squad approach of unloading 5-6 players at once. I'd say the plan was, the players kind of had been there ready to go, but it was just as France got that second, or just before France got that second try, which kind of blew the game open all over again.
Yeah, it was just a strange one for me, because in the past he's been a man that would be quite coy with his substitutions, and like sometimes you'd be sitting on benches and wondered if you were going to get on at all, because he just may not have used the bench. And I'm not just talking about myself. You've seen it in games with other players who you think could make a difference, and they haven't been pulled into the 15 at key moments. And then during Italy, you could understand it. The week previously, the match was won. That scoreline was bonus points secured. It was in the bag, and to make wholesale changes gave everybody minutes, up to everybody's minutes in the legs, while resting other players and ahead of a big week this week. So that was, you could understand that. But just, it surprised me, as you said, like where we were defending on the pitch, we had really good, success in the scrum and really solid. We were like, it was clean ball out the back and on both sides, and France weren't able to get much headway against us either. Now, whereas we didn't lose any ball on scrum, it just felt that it destabilizes a little bit. And that's no disrespect to the girls. It was just the timing, as you said, of doing them all at once. It's difficult for those players coming off the bench, and, for the ones who are on the pitch already to try and kind of link it up. But I'm sure the fact that he's done it 2 weeks in a row, it's probably something that's been done at training. But yeah, I always think that, probably sometimes, and look, you could look back at it and say that it's not the defining thing, and it's not, but sometimes to ease it in a little bit and obviously pick your moments a little bit differently as to when you put them in, and not put them under pressure straight away from the get-go. But yeah, just a bit of a strange one to do wholesale, because you don't see it that often in men's or women's game, to do it all at once, especially when a game is very much still in the balance at that stage of the game.
Yeah, I suppose, just kind of as I'm trying to rationalize it in my head, it's probably the first year for a few years where Ireland have had quite a strong bench on paper.
True.
So that kind of could come into it as well. In the past, the bench has, because this squad has been slowly building experience, it has often been like a real strong starting 15, and that's where you're missing the experience on the bench. That, I don't know, who knows, potentially that could be it. Just before we finish up then, we'll obviously look a little bit deeper into Wales in these final 2 rounds of games next week. No match this weekend, but broad strokes heading into these final 2 games. If Ireland can come out of it with 2 decent home wins against Wales up in Belfast and then Scotland at the Aviva, sign off the campaign with 3rd place. It will be 3 wins then for the first time in quite a few years. All in all, would that represent a solid Six Nations campaign?
I think so. I think the France one has probably put a little bit of a sting in this due to the fact that they can't now challenge for that top 2. I think it would have been seriously exciting if we'd gone away and, deserved to get something out of that France game, if not kind of to be able to push for a win in it. It was going to be a big ask. But now, I suppose the girls really, with this fallow week, have to pick themselves up and, dust themselves off the fact that they can't challenge for top 2 for, another year. But yeah, as you said, it's a big statement opportunity to go 3 from 3 in your home games, but not just to do it, and kind of we've seen some games over the last few years, even in our home games, that we probably haven't been too convincing. You would love to see the girls, and I back them fully, that they will come out showing how they dusted themselves off after England, that they will have the break week now, refresh the bodies, dust themselves off, and really put in 2 huge performances against Wales and against Scotland for the last 2 to really give the home crowd something to cheer about. And you can bet that hopefully the numbers, we've got 22,000 plus, I think, in for the Aviva, and I think Affidea, they always show up in Belfast as well for any performance that we've been up there for. So you'd hope that the girls will put in performances that they can be proud of, and as you said, finish off the tournament on a high and to continue to show that good trajectory, that they keep that going.
Yeah, so it's Wales first up in that second block of games. That's Saturday week up in Belfast, and then Scotland the following Sunday at Aviva Stadium. Hannah, thanks a million for joining us. As always, we'll go in a little bit deeper on that Wales game, as I said, next week. Any questions for Hannah as well, give us a shout. sportpodcasts@rte.ie, sportpodcasts@rte.ie. We'll do our best to get as many of your emails in on both sections of the podcast as well. Whatever you want to ask, go for it. But that's it from this week's RTÉ Rugby podcast. We'll speak to you again soon.